Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, and international football, all from the perspective of a couple of Americans. This week, we traveled to Eindhoven's Philipsstadion in the Netherlands to face PSV Eindhoven in the first leg of the round of 16 in the Champions League, and that is a lot of words to describe that tie. And then to Old Trafford to face Manchester United. Hello, Keith.
You know, I think it's the definite article. It's not Netherlands, it's the Netherlands.
Aha.
Which I think that's really obviously what adds it in, not the fact that there is a lot in that one. Wow. Almost as many goals as we scored.
One goal per word.
That was, wow, that was, we'll talk about this. I can't say I didn't see that coming, but I definitely didn't see that coming.
Yeah, really. Well, I was especially happy in light of a couple comments we got on one of our videos breaking down the competition in the Champions League, who's made it to the round of 16. And there were two individuals who commented that PSV should surely move on last week before the match happened. So a little bit of schadenfreude on their behalf.
I mean, there's the coach speak in my head, which says, "Hey, look, if you beat them 7-1 at their place, they could beat you 7-1 at your place." They're not. This one's pretty much put to bed. Which we'll talk about that. It's kind of an interesting, feeling.
And I was thinking about that, right? Like, yeah, could they close the gap? And like, I was thinking to my last, nearly 3 full seasons of watching this team, right? And all 3 of those included European play also. So it's all the competitions I've seen them in. I don't recall ever having even a 4-goal margin against us. And off the top of my head, I can't even think of a 3, although that probably happened, where our defense is just so good. Like, the chances of that happening are so slim. I can't even imagine it.
Yeah, I mean, so I did look this up since we were just talking about it. We beat last year in the group stage. We beat Lens 6-0 at home. We also beat PSV 4-0 at home. We then drew at Eindhoven, though that was a dead rubber because that was the end of the group stage. And we did beat Sporting 5-1 in Lisbon earlier this season. And that's just European competition. We had a couple with us just last year. We had a couple 5-0, 6-0. Hell, we just dropped 5-1 on Manchester City a couple weeks ago. So we have had a few of those. We've been very fortunate to not have been on the other end of those in the course of these last couple of years. So I should say you have been very fortunate to have not seen this being on the other end of those. I have, but that's a different thing.
Yeah. So something else that was kind of funny. I've been catching up on a couple seasons of Apple TV Plus shows that have come back in the last few months. And it's the time of year where MLS is returning. And I've seen an interesting ad before these Apple TV Plus shows. I sent you a link if you want to pull it open and tell me what you think of it. This is a new ad featuring Messi. So as it gets started, you'll see he's let me know when you pull it up. So it shows Messi juggling an American football, right? And he's doing all the fancy football juggling things that you would expect. And then let me know when you see how it ends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, he caps off the juggling by knocking it to score an American football field goal.
It reminds me, actually, there's a similar one. What is it, like this? Oh, gosh. I think it's this. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. From State Farm, where they have Danny Rojas from Ted Lasso, the actor whose name I don't remember, who I believe was a former player in his slightly younger days, still relatively young, but sort of doing the same thing with it's an American football, but looks like it's got the black and white paneling on it to look like a soccer ball, and then he dribbles it through the defenders and then kicks up a field goal, and there's some joke about goals and field goals, and Patrick Mahomes is involved because it's State Farm. Anyway, yeah. So,
So with this one, I liked the tagline: "When football ends, football begins." I like that. That's kind of funny, talking about the Super Bowl that just happened, and now it's time for MLS to get started. But a part of me is really curious. I mean, of course, if anybody's going to do it, it would be Leo Messi, but doing that with an American football has got to be a lot harder than the more or less perfectly round soccer ball, right? Where juggling it like that, getting it to hit like, the wide, flattish part of the football, not the pointy ends, and then to kick it like that midair. I wonder if there's some special effects involved.
It wouldn't surprise me if they had a little special effects for that. Although I think it's one of those where if you hit it right, because the big thing is just to make sure it's bouncing in a certain way that you're always getting that that sort of that wider part, which is where you want your foot to be hitting. I think as long as you're doing that, you're probably going to be okay. And a lot of these guys, I was talking about this actually with somebody, like most of those guys, pretty much anybody who's certainly at the MLS level can do keepy uppy for a tremendous amount of time. Like that's actually not a terribly difficult thing for them to do. But yeah, the extra step with the American football is an interesting one.
Yeah, basically. Well, moving on to some news. I hear there's more developing as far as Arsenal's new sporting director.
Right. So this is from David Ornstein. So as good as real. So over the weekend, it was revealed that Andrea Berta has reached an agreement to become Arsenal's new sporting director. He is currently at Atletico Madrid, has been there for over a decade, during which they've had an incredibly successful run. The third best team in Spain, of course, after Real and Barcelona. But he will be leaving Atletico apparently he left the club in January, and I presume will be taking over. He'll be taking over at Arsenal. I'm not quite sure when he'll be taking over. He hasn't been officially announced, as I'm aware, by the club yet, but presumably will be taking over certainly by the end of the season to get set for next year's campaign. Certainly an experienced man. He's done a lot with Atletico, which is a decent sized club, but certainly not financially a superpower in the way Real or Barcelona is, but still one that has a fair amount of money and has been relatively successful, both buying and selling players over the last decade plus while he's been there. So that'll be a nice thing too. I do get you get the sense you wonder if they're going to have to be a little bit more in the way of turnover. There's going to be some turnover with the club. We know some guys, the contracts are coming up. You're definitely looking to acquire some younger players, potentially at some lower prices, as well as being able to sell your current players for certain values. So we'll see how he's able to sort of work through that. And then, of course, I think we've talked a little bit about this as well. What is Arsenal prioritizing in the summer? Everybody sort of assumes it'll be a striker. Which it might be. That might be the case. But, obviously, we'll see what he can do as far as helping to continue the continued growth of the club. So more importantly, I guess most important thing is that there is somebody in that position. And so it's good. It's good that we have that.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see what happens once it's announced how quickly things end up moving. So, All right. Well, we have the fortune of, I guess, beginning talking about the far more fun match of the past week to discuss. So this was our Champions League match. This was 6 days ago as we record. This was last Tuesday, a little bit earlier in the week. Usually I'm used to Wednesdays or Thursdays for the midweek matches. But yeah, so this was the first leg of our round of 16 match against PSV Eindhoven. We ended up whomping them 1-7. That was... Wow. I just, even just watching the highlights with my son after it was over, and I knew that he'd enjoy seeing it, just like he couldn't believe, like his jaw literally dropped at like the 5th goal. And then again at the 6th and the 7th, he just couldn't believe what he was seeing.
Yeah. Some days, as they say, when it rains, it pours. And some days it really starts to work for you. And it was working for us. Because frankly, you could talk about a couple of others. We had an early chance from Declan Rice that was called back for being, just a tiny bit offside. There was another one. I think we had a really good chance. I mean, this could have easily been 8 or 9. Which is kind of wild to think about. I mean, we talked a little bit about this coming into the game. PSV is a dangerous offensive team. They've scored 70-something goals in the Eredivisie so far this season. And the switch of that is that as good as they are can be offensively, boy, their defending was a mess. I mean, holy cow, that was
in the box, especially. There's at least there's one direct goal that we scored because of a lapse in the box, and there was another one at least that was close.
It was shockingly bad how bad they were defensively, and they have been in some of the accounts from people out of the Netherlands or people who watch the Dutch league talked a little bit about how they've been they raced out to a strong start, but the last couple of weeks they've definitely been dropping points and everything, but still they had gone quite some time unbeaten at home, quite some time unbeaten. They had taken points off Liverpool in the Champions League, which no one else has done. So yeah, I mean, we tore them apart, which was fun to see after the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, it was. I was hoping that it would spill over into the Premier League, but that didn't materialize.
Yeah, I mean that was always going to be unlikely, and I remember talking to someone about this as well. Like some of the European teams are approaching the Champions League very differently than a lot of English teams are going to approach Arsenal in the Premier League, especially now that we're in the knockout round of the tournament. If you're PSV playing at home, this is your opportunity, especially given the away goals rule is now gone. This is your opportunity to make a statement. I mean, if them, a 2-1 or a 3-1 win would be a huge result for them, and one they're capable of doing. That's obviously not what happened here, but one of the things you'll see is that they're willing, partly because that's just their style. They're going to be much more front-footed, much more open. You think about week to week in the Dutch league, they're so much better than most of their opposition. So they're not going to practice parking the bus. They're not going to put 10 men behind the ball. I don't know that they could. I don't know that they actually know if their manager said park the bus. I don't think they'd know what to do. And so they're going to be more willing to look forward and play on the front foot. And, given the gap in quality between our sides, that plays right into our hands, unfortunately for them, very fortunately for us.
Well, right. It's funny you mentioned that, though, because thinking back to our season, right? Because, we're a team that is generally stronger than most of our local league opposition. But, when we played Manchester City away and we got that red card and we're down to 10 men for the entire half, I mean, we parked the bus extremely effectively against what was at the time probably the best offense in the Premier League and just held them off completely. Of course, they didn't have Erling Haaland, but other than that, they were still in top form. This was before their precipitous fall.
They had Haaland. That was the game where they lost.
Did they in that match?
Yeah, that was. I know you didn't notice him very much, did you?
I know. That was more recent one they did. But
yeah, but no, that was the game they lost to Rodri. Which that was it was an odd game. But yeah, I mean, we spent the second half packing the box and sort of daring them to break us down, and they ultimately were able to get the goal and get the draw. But again, that was also we were down to 10 men. We're on the road. We had a lead. Circumstances conspired to make that a reasonable decision, tactical decision on our part. That is not what we wanted to do. That is not how we wanted that game to go.
Oh yeah.
In all kinds of ways, but I do think, I do think this is one of those. Yeah, with PSV, I don't think they could play that kind of style. And there's something noble about that, right? This is how we play. This is how we do things. And if we're gonna go down, we're gonna go down our way. And I can respect that.
Frank Sinatra would approve.
This is not how they saw that one going. And to be fair, anytime you see a score line get to 5, 6, 7. Usually the last couple of goals are kind of one of those okay, you're just feeling really good. They're not goals you would necessarily score if it was 2-1. They sort of come because you're in that vein of form, and I don't want to say overplayed the margin, but definitely okay, you're this much better than them today, even though the score reads as you being this much better than them today. It just the variance kind of goes in your favor on that.
It's also probably a combination too of maybe you being so confident, you take shots that you might not have otherwise taken, and them also maybe suffering from a lack of confidence and just kind of getting. I mean, did you see the face of what was what was the captain's name? De Jong, I think. Did you see his face when he sat down on the bench when they subbed him off? Like, I've never seen a soccer player look more dejected and tired than the look on his face. I mean, it looked like he'd played 2 matches back to back.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, it's
going to hurt them too.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that score, and again, you hate to say that it's because it's technically it's only halftime. You know, there's still an entire second game to play. But we lead 7-1. So I feel pretty good about our chances. But I have to say, this one almost. I mean, we had some chances early, but this one kind of could have taken a very bad turn fairly early on. Obviously, we know Jurrien Timber got the first goal, which as an Ajax kid, he loved sticking it to PSV. But
I was happy when I saw that. That was like poetic. It's one of those moments that if you were watching this in a movie and someone like was writing the script for this match, you're like, oh, come on, really? The Dutch guy is going to score his first Champions League goal, I think it was, against the Dutch team. Like, oh, really?
Yeah. Well, against his youth club's rival. I mean, it's not just that it's another Dutch club. PSV and Ajax are 2 of the best clubs in the Netherlands and have a pretty serious rivalry, especially over the last few years as they've kind of traded the Dutch title back and forth. So you had to enjoy that. But really, we should focus our attention on the other of our fullbacks. Miles Lewis-Skelly had 2 fouls in very quick succession. Should we have been down to 10 men?
Well, so there's kind of 2 questions there, right? There's one question pertaining to each yellow card. I kind of took the first one at face value. How did you feel about that one? It seemed like it didn't bother me when I saw the challenge.
I thought it was a little soft. Again, I can't come away from the challenge and say, oh, that's definitely shouldn't have, it's totally wrong. But I thought that one was a little soft. For a yellow foul, certainly. Yeah, well, that was a bit of that one I wasn't sure about. But we've talked about this, the danger of picking up the yellow, like we saw with Calafiori last weekend. You pick up that yellow early on, and now you have to play on a yellow, and that makes every tackle you make just a little more dangerous.
Well, it should make you play a little bit differently. Although maybe if you're young and inexperienced, maybe you don't really play any differently when you're on a yellow card.
Nah. Yeah, I think experience is the right word for it. Because was it 2-3 minutes later?
Under 2 minutes later. Yeah.
I'll be honest. I'm not. We've talked about refereeing more than I'd like this season. I'm not sure how that wasn't given as a yellow. That was a pretty nasty challenge. That's a bad decision from Lewis-Skelly's part. Yeah,
no, I definitely thought he was going to be sent off, and I to me, there's a couple possibilities for why he didn't. I mean, for one thing, maybe he regretted the first yellow card. Maybe it was soft to him, like in hindsight, like he gave it, he wasn't going to take it back. But like maybe as he either saw a replay, I don't think he probably did, but at least as he was replaying it in his head, he was thinking, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have given that one. So then when the second one happens right after, even though that one in isolation would have been, maybe he's like, well, okay, I'm not going to send him off for it. But I was relieved, but surprised very.
It's just it was an odd one. I mean, and we know referees give makeup calls. We know that sort of thing goes on, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if in the circumstances, maybe he was thinking of it that way. But I mean, in a sense, if you're Lewis-Skelly, you cannot do that. That is just a poor decision at that stage of the game, and given what you've just gone through. And we've talked about this in the last couple of weeks. He's been kind of on that, like he's crossed that line. I know we all complained about Michael Oliver and the one against Wolves, and that was fairly revoked. But then he had the one in the last game that got whoever they were playing. It was that was that the West Ham game?
I don't remember anymore.
Yeah, but I mean that was kind of a red.
Right.
He's had some of these bad decisions, and I don't think it was a surprise at all that he was subbed off. Relatively. I mean, 35 minutes. That's an early sub, man. But he is 18. He's a young player. He's still learning the game at this level. And there's a certain speed associated with decision making, and then also things he was able to get away with as a younger player in younger levels he can't. Part because the players he's facing are bigger, stronger, and so that leads to a little bit more desperation. There is a school of thought that fouls and penalties are committed because you've been beaten. Like you do that because that's the basic theory behind the foul in the first place. You're cheating, right? You're breaking the rules because you couldn't stop them by the normal legal means.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing, again, we forget because he's come on and he's played so well. You do need to be reminded from time to time he is 18 years old. He is not going to he's not a fully formed article. There's still some work to be done on his game, and that's something that he's going to have to work on. And yeah, it's a little embarrassing to come off after 35 minutes, but also it was 3-0 at that point, so we're feeling okay.
Well, right. And I mean, nobody was surprised when Arteta subbed him out. Because everybody knew exactly what was going on. There was no question. Yeah. But, thankfully, somehow we did not get him taken out. And it was only 5 minutes later that we got up 3-0.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty crazy set of circumstances that led to Mikel Merino's goal. And by the way, before we talk about this goal, let me just have a quick tangent. When we're talking about the 7 goals that were scored in this match, that was from 6 shooters, I think, right? Odegaard was the only one who doubled up, I think.
Yeah, Odegaard had a pair. Everyone, otherwise it's 7 goals from 6 players.
That's how Arsenal rolls these days. Like it's crazy because we can say the Merino goal, the Calafiori goal, like everyone except Odegaard's like, which goal you're talking about when you you name the shooter, even though there's 7 of them. But anyway, so crazy set of circumstances resulting in Merino's goal. It was bizarre.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, first off, again, we talked about the poor defending from PSV. I mean, one guy just fell over.
Right.
What are you supposed to do with that?
I know.
You can almost just imagine the PSV manager just like,
throwing his
like
hands
what
up.
do you how do you we talk about the managers and how they control the game and tactical decisions, and we've talked about a little bit of this with Arteta a little bit too. It's not as if he tells the team, "Oh, just kick the ball around the box for a little bit and don't try to shoot." And you got to imagine as the manager sometimes. I mean, it's obviously a very different circumstance, but I mean, education. And there are times you've told students things, you've handed them things, you've explained things to them, they've repeated it back to you, and then you put them in a situation and you ask them the question, and then they do the exact opposite of the thing they literally do the one thing you literally told them not to do, and it's just sometimes like.
So I'm familiar with that phenomenon with my second grader that continues into higher education. Yes,
I don't. I mean, again, we're talking about professional athletes at the highest level of the sport, right? I don't think it ever really goes away. I'm sure there are plenty of people. I can imagine a few of our coworkers are like, "Oh yes, let's complain. Let's hear about your complaints about this." So,
yeah. But so the one guy falls over, and then he megs the next guy who. The first few times I saw the goal, it looked like it was just completely bad stance that he left his legs so wide open. I think he was just completely caught off guard that the other guy fell over, though, as I've been watching it a little bit now. Like, he was starting to get his right knee down and just didn't in time. Yeah. So I don't fault that second defender that got nutmegged. I don't fault him quite as much. But yeah, it was it was just such a leisurely tap in that Merino was able to make. There was a really long VAR review after this, though. So a couple things I wanted to ask you about with that. So first of all, the semi-automated offside referee, that is supposed to make it so that you don't wait. It's supposed to be a near immediate decision. And what we also didn't get, that we did get with the Declan Rice goal that got called back, we didn't get the graphic showing what the question was, where the line was drawn, and that Merino was onside. We didn't get the satisfaction of seeing a resulting graphic like that.
Well, so in this case, because here's the thing, he was offside. He was behind the defender when the ball is initially played to him. But what ends up happening is the defender makes a play on the ball. And so the offside question is how much of that was a deliberate attempt by the defender to play the ball and thus counts as a change of possession.
Oh, so it's a judgment call.
Yeah, right, that's the judgment call there. And so that's one where the semi-automated offsides doesn't come into effect because if you watch the video, he's obviously offside. When the ball is played in his direction, he's clearly offside. You don't need the system for that. The video shows you that pretty clearly. But, because it comes off the defender, now it's a question. Has he played the ball and as a result negated the offside? Now, I thought the review was a little long. I thought it was pretty obvious to me that he, or at least made enough of it deflected enough. It was a deliberate enough attempt. It's supposed to avoid like a deflection off your backside or something that you couldn't do anything about. To me, it looks like a pretty clear and very poor, but very clear attempt to play the ball.
Right, it was a slide tackle. He pushed the ball forward as he slid to the ground to try and poke it away, and he just didn't do it well. Yeah,
right. And so as a result, to me, that was actually a fairly easy decision. But that's what they were reviewing there. It wasn't whether or not Merino was offside. He was,
right?
But because that gets to the judgment call of does the defender play the ball, which to me that seemed pretty straightforward.
I'm glad you explained that because that was not clear for me watching the broadcast. Like they weren't explaining any of that. They weren't showing any of that. So I just was like, I don't know what's the question.
Well, at least let me rephrase that because you're right. They don't talk about that as much as I had the broadcast on in the office, and so there were parts that I didn't quite follow. But my impression watching that was if they're reviewing like that, it's not about the cameras being lined up. Yeah. It would have been about something else, and they kept showing that deflection. And so to me, that was what they were looking at.
I guess I was just marveling at the comedy of errors and not realizing that that's why they were showing that section over and over again. Yeah, but no, so it was, that was a very strong moment. Once we pulled 3 ahead, I started feeling pretty good about the match, which, basically lasted until one Thomas Partey made a questionable defensive move.
Yeah, this one's a tough one for me because on some level, 2 things in terms of two criticisms, we'll call them on the call. One is that, to me, Partey is pushed into it. So obviously part of what happens is he's going to ground and ends up with his arm around the guy, one of the attacking players, basically around his neck and sort of pulls him to the ground.
Yeah.
And to me, he's pushed into it. So this is not a foul so much as it is, attempting to get his balance and gets the guy.
Yeah, I can see that.
In addition to that, we've seen this fairly often, especially in England. Now, obviously, we talk about the difference in refereeing between the Premier League and the Champions League, but we've seen this fairly often. There's any kind you see any set piece, especially on corners. There's all kinds of grappling and pushing and grabbing and all this stuff, and it never gets called. And so there's a bit of frustration for me watching it and thinking, really, that you're calling that of all the things that have been happening in the box, that's the thing you call. On the other hand, as you watch the replay, it could just have been a simple case of the referee was looking right, happened to be looking right at it when it happened. And if that's what you see,
his hands on his throat,
you pretty much have to. It is a foul. It's not a good position to put himself in. Or Partey gets put in. I don't know how much I blame him for it in general, but it's not a good position to be in. And if you're the referee and you see that, you say, we talk about how you leave the referee no choice. You kind of didn't in that case. And it was a heck of a penalty too. Came right in, punched it home. That was a really good penalty. Not a whole lot Raya can do with that.
Yeah, he didn't even really try. I think by the time he knew which direction it was going, it was already in the back of the net.
Yeah, and so I don't know. Were you feeling at all a tiny bit nervous going into the half, having them just grab a goal at 3-1?
Yeah, because of the timing of it, yes, a little bit. You're thinking what the locker room halftime talk is going to be, and he's firing them up, and they're going to come out swinging and ready to close the gap. But that is certainly not how it ended up going.
Yeah, and this is one of those where you do remember it is the first half of the game, not the first half of this game, but rather this game is the first half of the overall tie. And, this game looks very different if they're able to pull one back in the second half and it ends 3-2.
Right.
And now they're only down a goal heading to the Emirates and things get a little nervy. So it's not even necessarily could they lose this game or drop points, because that's not what matters here. But with every goal counting like that, to go from 3-0 to 3-1, with an entire half to play in their stadium, yeah, there was a little bit of nervousness. And then in about 5 minutes, it was gone because we just had two more and it was over.
Yeah, 5-1. Basically. Yeah. And it only got better from there. I mean, that clearly just cut the legs out from under them completely, and they just kind of retracted into their shells, and that was it.
Yeah. I mean, because we've been struggling so much to score over the last couple of weeks, even 3-0 feels like a gift from the gods, right? Like it just feels like, oh my god, what do we even do with this? And then to give up, to concede the goal, like, oh, are we really going to waste this? We scored 3 goals. I don't know how many more we can do, and then all of a sudden, bang, 5-1. Oh, it's over. It's over. But again, the game's not over. We punched in 2 more. It's 7-1. Again, coach speak, right? We did it to them. They could do it to us. They're not winning 7. They're not scoring 7 goals in the Emirates. No.
So let me ask about that. So it occurs to me that there really isn't much of a reason for that second leg to be played at all. Like, would a team like PSV, would they ever forfeit? Would they ever concede it and not play?
At this level, no. At this level, you have to walk in. Yeah, at this level, this is the top level of the professional game. Also, for no other reason than there's so many financial implications in terms of ticket sales, television broadcast. Because the problem is, if PSV were to decide to forfeit the game, they'd actually probably have to pay a pretty hefty fine to UEFA and potentially to Arsenal as well to make up for the lost revenue for not playing the game. So in a pure financial sense, it would make 0 sense for them to play the game, or to not play the game. Sorry. Apparently, also you actually do get an increased payment depending on the result. So for Arsenal, like a 0-0, like it is actually more valuable to us to win this game second leg 1-0 than to draw it 0-0, because then you don't there's money involved for winning versus drawing a match at this stage. So. Yeah, and that's without even talking about just the spirit of competition. These are competitive guys, and PSV is going to be embarrassed by what happened.
Oh yeah, right.
So you got to think. So you got to think they're going to come out with a little bit of with a little bit more fire, but it's just hard to see them. Again, this one's it's not officially over, but it's over. This one, I'd be very curious, really, to see how Arteta thinks about this game in terms of the rotation of the side.
Right.
How is this a game where maybe you experiment a little bit in terms? We've talked. We'll get to the United game and our difficulties scoring in just a moment. Is this a game where maybe you get a little bit experimental in terms of different lineups, different formations, trying different players in different positions? We've been running Merino out there as a center forward. I don't know that I realize we're coming off a game where we just scored 7 goals. I don't know that you can say it works.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting into good positions. Like he's doing some of the things that you would want him to be doing. No, he's not converting like we would expect someone whose title is center forward to do. But I'm a little optimistic. I'm a little hopeful about it.
I mean, I think honestly, the player we may want to see more of, actually, especially based on some of what we saw in the United game, is probably Kieran Tierney. Because Tierney's game is driving down the wing and thumping it into the, thumping crosses into the box, and that's probably where Merino is going to end up being the most dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see that, honestly. Maybe maybe a little more Tierney. Maybe you consider playing Wanyeri in the central position as a center forward. I've talked about him being able to play in the middle as opposed to being out on the wings.
Yeah.
I think there are some things you can do there. Do you maybe see Neto in goal? Give David Raya a breather.
Yeah, I think we probably could see Neto. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some of our youth players or other members of the bench that we haven't seen yet. Like, why not? As long as we keep our back line the same, the chances of them getting 6 goals on us is so slim, like even in the worst case scenario, where I would like to see some players who, maybe you give them a chance and maybe they surprise you or something. People who we've been hesitant to put out there, but given that we need players right now, maybe it's a good trial for someone.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting choice, especially given, we'll have Chelsea next weekend. That's not a small game, even though they've been kind of, Chelsea's definitely fallen off quite a bit from their stronger start to the season.
I saw they beat City.
No, who was it? Forest beat City this past weekend. Chelsea might have. I don't know. Everyone was beating City for a while there.
Let me look it up now because I could have sworn I saw that.
But yeah, they've been a team that's but that's a game that's you really need a result in, especially at home. Whereas with PSV, if you feel the result is more or less assured, I don't know. I saw somewhere the analytical sense was that what will Arteta do? He'll make fewer changes than you want. I expect we're going to see a relatively full strength lineup out there, relative to what you're suggesting. The sort of massive rotated side. Jakub Kiwior's in at center back, and Zinchenko's in the midfield, and but maybe Ben White gets a start. Maybe I'd be interested to see what he does with Martinelli. We'll talk a little bit about him in just a moment. I'm kind of curious to see how they think about approaching the different, this game, given it isn't a dead rubber. The tie is not finished, but also it kind of is. And so it'd be very curious to see how Arteta thinks about that. In the end, it'll probably be, as someone said, again, probably less than you want, but less rotation than you want, but
real-time follow-up. Apparently, it was just that I'd seen the score during the halftime or whatever, where they briefly showed it on screen. And I think Leicester's crest, just at a glance, it's circular and kind of has blue and yellow. And I think I mistook Leicester for Manchester City. I may be the first person in history to confuse those two teams. but there it is.
They're both they both won the Premier League in the last decade, so
All right, so what is our competition looking like in the Champions League, given that is just about the only place we can hope to get a trophy this season? How's that looking?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So because everything's bracketed, which is weird relative to this, but it's fine. We will face the winner of the Madrid derby, so Real and Atletico, which, by the way, future Arsenal sporting director Andrea Berta. With Atletico Madrid, Real took the first leg 2-1 in that game. That was at the Santiago Bernabeu. They'll play at Atletico's Park, the Metropolitano. That'll be this week, same time as Arsenal's game on Wednesday. So we'll see how that plays out. So 2-1 to Madrid, to Real Madrid, heading to Atletico next in this week's game. Just a few other side, also in our bracket, Liverpool, a late goal from Harvey Elliott made it 1-0 at PSG. They'll play the second leg at home on Tuesday. Aston Villa won 3-1 at Club Brugge. A pair of late goals got them the win there. They'll come home on the 12th in Villa Park. And then otherwise, Barcelona 1-0 over Benfica. Borussia Dortmund and Lille 1-1. Bayern Munich 3-0 over Leverkusen, and then Inter Milan 2-0 over Feyenoord.
Well, the party's got to end sometime, and it ended for us yesterday as we record, March 9th. We went to Old Trafford, and what is becoming surprisingly and disappointingly and frustratingly frequent in the Premier League, we came away with 1 point.
I hate that team. I hate that stadium. I hate playing there. They stink. That's the frustrating part about it. They're I mean, bathe in this, enjoy this moment that we live in where Manchester United is terrible. Because they're 15th in the league. They're not a good team. They've got a couple talented players, but for the most part, they're not a very good team. And the truth is, we didn't play particularly well. I mean, you could easily argue they could have won that game, or maybe should have won that game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess to me, this one really, this one was I don't want to say lost, but the chance to win, it just feels to me like we have to score early.
Mm-hmm.
Like we saw Timber scored, what was it, like the 20th minute, 20 minutes in, 15, 20 minutes in against PSV.
Yeah.
And from there, it opens up the floodgates. And so you saw that. We had a few opportunities early on. Merino went just wide. Odegaard had a good shot.
Oh, yeah.
A bunch of them just kind of, a couple of them flying around. It just, but when we don't convert, it just feels like you're waiting, and it just it's at a certain point it does feel like it's a little bit mental too, that we don't get that goal. Increasingly, guys get tighter and tighter. It becomes more and more difficult. You saw some confident chances early on from players like Trossard, and then later in the game, people just aren't taking those same kind of shots.
Mm-hmm.
And and unfortunately, we put ourselves in this position where a player of Bruno Fernandes' quality can hurt you, and he did.
Yeah, so this was, I don't think, really a controversial foul against him. I think that was a pretty straightforward, okay, and they get a free kick. It stinks that it's so close to the top of the box, but
yeah, it happened. Trossard and Garnacho. It wasn't Fernandes wasn't the one fouled. He just won the
right.
kick, but it was Garnacho was fouled. But yeah,
and Garnacho was definitely the most threatening player throughout the match. But
it was a clumsy challenge from Trossard. It's not but it's certainly not unfair. That the whistle was blown there. So,
yep. So,
but yeah, then that free kick, man.
Yeah, it was. Ultimately, hats off to him. That's not easy to do, to get it over the wall and then under the crossbar, and he did it. I was hearing a little bit of controversy around it, though. Do you know what happened there a little bit?
So, yeah, again, like this one I'm watching in a bar. So the commentary is a little difficult to hear, and usually halftime where everybody's kind of chatting about other things for a few minutes. But basically what you end up seeing is that the wall is 11 yards away from the ball.
And
so we talk about the defensive wall. The Arsenal players lined up in defense, building the wall in front of the goal. Typically, is 10 yards. You have the ball's position, and 10 yards back of it is the wall between the free kick and the goal. And in this case, it was 11 feet away, and that ball just clears the jumping heads of the defenders and makes its way into a position. Gets into the goal. That would bother me a lot more if this was, I don't know, maybe like 5 years ago. When you talk about the Arsenal teams were finishing like in 8th, because that's exactly the kind of thing that would have happened to them. To me, that's the sort of thing that's kind of sloppy and clumsy, and just a thing that kind of, it's just one of those little things you should be keeping track of, and then when you don't, it's kind of embarrassing that it happens to you. I don't know. I mean, what did you see or hear in the course of your talk?
Yeah, they were talking a lot about the 11-yard distance instead of 10 yards. So the 10 yards is kind of a minimum distance, and the referee will very often make it a little bit more than 10 yards, just given that the wall is likely to creep forward a little bit. So that way, even when they creep, they jump, whatever it is, that you aren't going less than 10 yards. It's always staying above that minimum. What was also interesting this time around was, as they were forming the wall, you saw them kind of looking at the grass for where the line should be, and it had dissolved already. So the line that the referee had made was gone. Was it Anthony Taylor, I think, was the ref this time? So the line had disappeared already. Meanwhile, you have Martinelli running or walking back and forth between the wall and the keeper, just making himself a nuisance to Onana, trying to get in his way so he can't coordinate as clearly with the guys who are forming the. Oh wait, hold on, wait, never mind, Raya. No, thinking of a different situation. Whoops. Nope. Wires crossed.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, so they're trying to form the wall, and it wasn't clear. And then by the time all was said and done, it was a little over 11 yards instead of 10 yards. And yeah, like if he had been a yard closer to the wall, it would have either hit their heads, or had he gone higher to get it over their heads, it then wouldn't have dropped enough and would have bounced off the crossbar or gone clear of the crossbar. So yeah, it's unfortunate that it worked out that way. I don't know that it's really necessarily controversial. I guess it's just something to pay attention to for those players, and maybe in the future they give Raya a heads up and let him know that, maybe he's a little bit further back, and maybe he shouldn't have left that left side open so much. I mean, clearly he thought that the wall was protecting that side, so he just needed to protect his right side. But
yeah, I didn't think Raya played that one particularly well. I think that is also, to a certain degree, I mean, again, we talk about it. It's 10 yards or 10 meters, whatever it is. But look at how it's marked off. The referee stands where the ball is, and then he takes a few steps forward until he's like, my strides have taken me 10 yards. And I'm sure they're relatively consistent, relatively speaking. But it's just, it's so imprecise that I sort of look and go, well, these people, this time they were 11 meters away as opposed to 10. It feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because we didn't notice that at all. Someone had mentioned, there was a brief mention of it at halftime. I just, to me, that's kind of the thing that if as the defenders, you have to be a little better at noticing or discussing. You definitely need to, Raya as well. But also you sort of, Raya's got to position himself better, and then you just kind of have to do more with it. I mean, you also have to, to a certain degree, I should say, tip your cap to Fernandes, who, it's a good kick. He puts it where it needs to be. That's not an easy one. He's very good at those free kicks. It's not an easy play for him to make, and he does. And, it's frustrating that it's him of all players, but,
Yeah. So otherwise, though, what was kind of interesting while I was trying to look up what the rules were around where the ball needs to be and things like that, it was interesting how they were talking about the 10-yard minimum distance, the exception being unless the team is on their own goal line between the goalposts. And as I'm reading the textual description of this, I'm trying to picture the circumstance under which the free kick would be 10 yards away from the goal line, and yet it's not a penalty, which is, I couldn't figure it out, except for maybe if you were like alongside the byline outside the 18-yard box. Like, I don't know what the gap is between the edge of the box and the near post or something, if that might be 10 meters or so. But how could that happen? Why would that be relevant?
So to me, that would happen and come about in the place of an indirect free kick. So we normally think of them as being the direct free kicks. The difference being that when a direct free kick, you have the opportunity to go direct onto goal. That is, you can take a shot and score. Indirect, someone else has to touch it before it goes into the goal for it to count.
Right.
It's interesting. I'm looking through the rules of the game. And it says, the laws of the game, indirect free kick is awarded if a player plays in a dangerous manner, impedes the progress of an opponent without any contact being made, is guilty of dissent, prevents the goalkeeper from releasing the ball, initiates a deliberate trick for the ball to be passed to the goalkeeper at the head, or commits any other offense for which play is stopped to caution or send off a player. There are a few instances where the indirect free kick is given. I don't love that description because that sounds like fouls. But basically, you can have, and I've seen it, an indirect free kick take place inside the box. Which is weird because you're sitting inside the box, but you can't score. And so you will see players line up basically on the goal line and put the wall there. And because of where the ball is positioned, there may be less than 10 yards between you and the goal. Or the ball and the goal, in which case, well, you have to, you can still be in the field of play. Technically, if you're across the goal line, you're in the net, you are out of the field of play. So, you have to be able to stand there, even if it is less than 10 yards away.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I'll have to keep my eyes open. Hopefully we don't have it happen, at least in our own penalty box.
Well, yeah, I'll take it in theirs,
Yeah. So yeah, I was hallucinating about Martinelli being involved in that free kick because he didn't get subbed in until like midway into the second half. So there's several reasons that was implausible and not not something that actually happened. But he did come back. They showed him on the bench earlier in the match, so I was excited at that possibility. And then he got brought on for who was it? Was it Waneri he came on for?
I believe so. Yes. I mean, it was an exciting thing to be able to look up, and there's Martinelli, which I have to say, I did not hear anything all week about him being in practice. I hadn't heard anything about the lead up to the game, about him potentially playing. We had talked about it. Well, the last we had talked about it, right? Our plan was basically we expected him to come back after the international break. Nope. Apparently he's there. And I was a little surprised. Close to the chest,
and
I was a little surprised. I mean, it was announced pregame when they announced the lineup. They said Martinelli was back on the bench. And he came on. I guess he came on a little earlier than I expected. He came on about at the hour mark. I kind of figured he'd probably get a slightly less of a run out coming back from his injury. But, the situation was such that you would have expected it. We needed a goal. And, he was one of our more dangerous offensive players at that point, which isn't a surprise, but...
Well, it was a little bit of a surprise because, he's coming off a hamstring injury and it didn't look like it slowed him down at all. He still had his characteristic speed. He seemed just as much of a threat as he's ever been. I think it was unusual seeing him on the right side. He's played there once or twice since Saka's been injured. But I guess they kept Trossard playing the left side where he has been and brought Martinelli on the right. And he seems comfortable there. It doesn't seem like as long as Saka's out, there's any reason to have him play on the left side with Trossard's in. So,
yeah, that'll be another interesting thing we'll sort of see, especially for the PSV game or just in general going forward, right? I mean, what is the expectation for Martinelli? How are we going to use those players in different positions? But yeah, it was nice to see him back. I didn't expect it. It was a pleasant surprise. And more importantly, like you talked about, he's coming back from the hamstring. Obviously, I think that diminished the amount of time he was going to be on the field. But I think, he had his speed there. I mean, obviously, that's really good to see and really important to see. But also, I just think it's good that, I don't think if he didn't have that back, I don't think you have I think the way the season has gone, you don't play a 60% Martinelli. If he's coming on, especially given, I mean, I know nobody wants to say the league is over, but Liverpool won't drop points. At a certain point, you gotta. We talk about tipping our cap. At some point, you just gotta tip your cap. Liverpool's been really good all year, and at a certain point, it just becomes too difficult. And so, I hate dropping points to United, and they stink, and we shouldn't have, and all of that. But you look at what we're dealing with in terms of injuries, difficulties on the front line. You look at the gap that Liverpool's opened up at this point, and I think it's fair for us to sort of look and say, okay, you're never going to admit it. You're never going to see them truly give up, but it's hard to see it at this point,
Yeah. But yeah, so, we went scoreless for a long time, even after Martinelli came on. It was another 15, 16 minutes or so before Odegaard, who has really been in good form, not aside from, obviously he scored 2 goals against PSV, but even aside from that, just really moving the ball around with stylish flair like he does, getting it into dangerous places. He gets the ball to Timber, who makes a dangerous press down into the box and then gets it over to Declan Rice, who scores our only goal of the match.
Yeah, that was definitely, it's interesting. We've developed tactically over the last couple of years to have the wingers almost more cut in on the top of the box, right? You think of Saka cutting across and launching a curler. But this was sort of going back to an older style, even back to last season when you get Ben White in the overlapping runs. You'd see guys go deep towards the touchline and then hit low and hard crosses, which was a little more we were getting there. And really, I think a lot of this goes, really the credit to Declan Rice, who was my player of the match on this one. I thought he was excellent yesterday. And, it was a deserved goal in that sense, but also just, that kind of directness that we're missing, right? It does feel, especially as the game goes on, we sort of lack confidence. They get increasingly cute with their opportunities, and that's bad because then they don't, they can't create opportunities, and then they delay for shots and it get blocked and all of that. And so I think there was a directness to this where Rice, he was able to finish it, and certainly it was a goal we needed. The draw is a disappointing result, but to have lost to those guys,
that would have been so bad. Yeah,
to have lost to them in Old Trafford. Yeah, so there was definitely a bit of a catharsis coming from that one. But yeah, it was good. It was good to see. It was good that we got on the board. It's good that we'll walk out of there with the result. Although we had a few opportunities late in the game where that wasn't at all assured. In fact, probably shouldn't have been.
I know, and I was so hopeful when he scored in the 74th minute. I was like, okay, that's enough time to make a push and really get that one more to clinch it, and it just didn't materialize. It was frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, really, again, we talk about the quality of play we brought to this game. I mean, sure, United was always going to sit deep, and they were packing the box, et cetera, but we had long stretches we didn't play particularly well. We were shockingly overrun or run through in the midfield a few times, which is weird because their midfield kind of stinks, and ours is like theoretically a strength of the side. They were able to break a few too many times for my taste. It's just is a frustrating game, and really it took. Raya had a few odd moments. He also had a couple of really good saves, including another double save where he's able to knock one off his own goal line. This one's tough because I want to be frustrated and say, "Oh, United's bad and we should have beaten them," but like honestly, our performance in the day didn't earn that. We weren't, we didn't score when we were on the front foot, and it kind of caught up to us, and we were chasing the game for the second half, and we leveled, and that's great, but honestly, it's hard to walk out of this one with anything less than just a sour taste in your mouth. It's just frustrating. This one's just frustrating.
Yeah, no, very. I mean, every draw we've had in the last few months has just felt extremely frustrating. Thankfully, at least, we're mostly talking about draws and at least not all-out losses, but still, it feels that way. Yeah. They feel similar, but yeah. So you hinted at your man of the match for the United match. Who is your player of the week?
In the end, I am going to go with Declan Rice. I think he was the best player in this game. I want to have a lot of nice things to say about Odegaard from the PSV game, obviously the goals, but I did think he was still a little ragged. I still feel like we're just not getting a fully formed and a quality version of Odegaard this season. And we've talked about all the reasons why. So it's been a little frustrating, but I thought Rice was solid against PSV. I mean, I don't think anybody was poor against PSV. Well, maybe Lewis-Skelly with some of those tackles, but I don't think anyone was poor against PSV. I think that was just an overall very strong team performance, and so you add in, I think, the overall really good game he had against United. I'm going to say Declan Rice is my player of the week.
Yeah, that's a good call. I mean, so I've got a lot more notes about PSV who I would pick, and basically, Lewis-Skelly, contrary to how he flamed out, was pretty good before he got subbed out. So I want to give him some credit there. He was moving the ball around and contributing a lot before he had the double foul and had to get subbed off. But Saliba was really key in the beginning of the PSV match. He had a couple key saves that kept that match from going the other way early on. And if it had gone that way early on, who knows how the rest of it would have gone. So definitely he was very important there. I did notice Odegaard a lot in both matches, just quality on the ball. In the Manchester United match, overall for that match, I would give it to Raya. He had enough saves that shouldn't have ultimately been necessary, but were. And he definitely kept us from losing that match in a way that the rest of the defense didn't as much. There were some lapses, and he was called into action more than he probably should have been. But overall, I can't pick Raya because he didn't matter as much in the PSV match. Like, he wasn't called on. Like, he just didn't have anything to do. It's really hard. I think ultimately I'm probably going to fall on Odegaard, even though he's not as good as we have seen him in the past. He was the most consistent to me across both matches, and just seeing he's just the little flick passes, the deking like around with the ball and stuff like that. Like, I enjoy watching him play, and it's good that he's doing that again, because there was a long stretch this season where I wasn't enjoying watching him as much. So from that point of view, he's back, although, still definitely a little ways to go before he's at the peak of, last season or the season before, but, yeah. So what is up for next week?
Right. So as we've talked about, first on Wednesday, home to PSV, the second leg of the Champions League round of 16 match. We lead 7-1 on aggregate. I feel pretty good about this one, but it'll be nice to do it, and nice to head into the quarterfinals, and we'll see about the Madrid. By the way, I did see somewhere, I believe for the quarterfinals we would host the first leg, and would be in Madrid for the second leg, whichever Madrid side it would be.
Okay.
So that'll be on Wednesday. That'll be on Paramount Plus. And then on Sunday, Premier League home against Chelsea. That game will be on Peacock, at least in the US. Last game before the international break, the final international break of this season.
All right. Thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with a link in the show notes. Your homework for today, by which I mean a completely optional way to help us out that we'd really appreciate, is to comment on a video or write a podcast review. We record the show using Zencaster. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about and our social pages. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at DoveFrankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
All right, let's really try to win both these games this week, huh?